I'm Lisa Owen. Heidi Akine. Anyone smell a rat? The Prime Minister denies the government's pinched rapid antigen tests from businesses. Businesses say otherwise, and it's really hard to decipher what the Ministry of Health is saying at all. We're in hot pursuit of the truth. Fresh COVID modelling a new timeline for the big sick and the Omicron wave. How reliable are the projections? We talk to children who've only experienced school life during a pandemic. Hot under the hood over COVID mandates, hundreds of protesters park up at Parliament. A crime scene cleaning companies apologised after posting graphic pictures on social media. And a one-eyed moggy called Winky comes back from the dead after a decade when he went missing from Auckland's viaduct.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. Kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says New Zealanders can influence how many people end up in hospital with Omicron by getting boosted. New modelling shows between about 800 and 4,000 people in hospital on any given day at the peak of the outbreak. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
The modelling by Te Punaha Matatini looks at scenarios with high public health restrictions and booster uptake versus low restrictions and uptake. The number of deaths ranges from about 400 to about 1,400. The Prime Minister says she's optimistic the lower of the scenarios will play out, but she says the number of people who are boosted will make all the difference, reducing the severity of illness and the pressure on the health system.
Jacinda Ardern says people who are now eligible for their third vaccination will be sent a reminder via text or email. And the government is increasing the number of people who will be eligible to free flu vaccines this year to up to 2 million. The government is giving $400,000 to rural support agencies to help farmers prepare for impacts of the COVID-19 Omicron variant. This includes scenarios such as planning for who will run a farm and who will look after livestock at short notice if farmers or their key workers are infected. The opposition has accused the government of spin and cover-up over its role in purchasing rapid antigen tests. Last month, the Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, revealed he had requested test suppliers prioritise the government's orders over private businesses. At the time, he said that applied only to future orders, not tests already on shore. The Health Ministry has since confirmed some of the tests which went to the government were already in the country, but insists they were unallocated. Both National and ACT say it's not good enough.
Look, it's just been a shambles right from the start.
The level of spin and cover-up from Ashley Bloomfield is breathtaking, even for him.
As of today, there are 6.4 million rapid antigen tests in the country. Anti-mandate protesters are now putting up tents on the grounds of Parliament. A large crowd that gathered this morning has mostly dispersed. However, a few hundred people are yet to leave. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Some of the protesters have been urging others to stay on the grounds overnight. Trucks and camper vans can still be seen on the roads surrounding Parliament. However, under Parliament's rules, there are to be no structures or protesting on the grounds at night. A decision is yet to be made on what will happen if protesters are still there once it gets dark. A police spokesperson says no arrests have been made over the protest today.
The protest has disrupted some bus services around Parliament, with one stop on Molesworth Street closed. A trauma cleaning business that has been posting graphic death-related images on social media has apologised. Sam Ollie reports.
Crime scene cleaners co-owner Carl Loader has just put out a statement after RNZ reported on the company's posts this morning. He says the business is deeply upset the pages have caused a reaction today, and he sincerely apologises to anyone who has been offended. Mr. Loader says he thought that sharing images of the work would raise awareness of important social issues. He says he should have kept a closer eye on the content. The pages have been taken down, and the company is reviewing its future on social media. The Chief Coroner is assessing whether posts breached non-publication orders.
And the Minister of Energy and Resources says her vision for the future of Southland hasn't changed, despite Rio Tinto signalling an interest to remain at Tiwai Point beyond 2024. In 2020, the mining giant threatened to close its aluminium smelter in Tiwai Point over electricity costs. After securing a cut-price power deal, it agreed to keep it open for 4 more years. But now, with aluminium prices hitting historical highs, the smelter says there's a pathway for it to continue operating beyond that. Megan Woods says the will they won't they uncertainty creates frustration for Southlanders, but whatever the outcome, the government will not be offering taxpayer-funded subsidies to Rio Tinto. Now to sport, and football fern Rebecca Stott is ready to make her return to international football following her recovery from cancer. Stott has been named in the Ferns squad for a 4-team tournament in the United States later this month, a year after being diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Stott returned to A-League action in December, and she says she's now about where she wants to be.
Yeah, I think that was always my goal, was to get back as quickly as I possibly could. I probably thought I'd be able to, get back quicker, but I had to definitely be patient with my body and just take it slow. But no, I'm so happy that I am back to where I am, and I'm just hopeful that I can keep improving and keep getting fitter and healthier.
Rebecca Stott has told coach Jitka Klimkova she wants to play at centre-back for the football Ferns. New Zealand speed skater Peter Michael has plenty of motivation to win a medal at the Winter Olympics. Michael will compete in the 1500 metres in Beijing tonight, hoping to at least go one better than he did in Pyeongchang 4 years ago, when he finished 4th in both the 5000 metres and team pursuit events.
Yeah, definitely motivated. It's always difficult to walk away with a couple of fourths. Everyone says that second sucks, but in reality, fourth can guarantee is a lot worse.
Also competing tonight is Wanaka biathlete Campbell Wright in the 20-kilometre event. That's the news.
Excusing the inexplicable.
If you don't handle the social media part of the business. I do look occasionally, I don't even have Facebook.
Dealing with deluges.
A few local kids, they all had their pink Speedos on and they were all skinboarding across the field, which looked like great fun. But they saw me coming in the school car and ran off.
And a father celebrates his daughter's Olympic success.
We always had trampolines in the backyard. She's always been, spinning and jumping and doing all the things that really were the foundation for what she's achieved.
Going for gold. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods and a few showers. For the remainder of the North Island, scattered rain for most today, but only partly cloudy from Manawatu to Wellington. For tomorrow, areas of cloud and isolated showers, some are heavy and maybe thundery about the central North Island. To the South Island, for Marlborough and Nelson, mostly fine today apart from drizzle patches in Marlborough, clearing this afternoon. Rain at times tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine at first today, but a few spots of rain later. Rain tomorrow with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. For Canterbury, mainly fine today, but cloud increasing tonight. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon. For Otago and Southland, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with drizzle about eastern Otago and occasional rain elsewhere from the afternoon. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, fine spells, a chance of a shower. It's 7 minutes past 5. Our next news headlines are at 5:30.
Kia ora rā, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Prime Minister has been dragged into a fresh ministry-made muddle over rapid antigen tests on the first day back at Parliament. The opposition accuses the government of commandeering tests from private businesses due to a lack of preparedness. The government denies any claim. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Day one back in the debating chamber for 2022, the summer slumbers well and truly over.
This House has no confidence in this government that returns to Wellington at the start of each year with more promises it has no intention of keeping and fails to deliver.
Every aspect of the response has been incompetent.
Mr. Speaker, no country is immune from Omicron's disruption, but we are working hard to avoid the worst of it, and we are better prepared than most.
But on that last point, the public is split. The latest News Hub Read research poll asked, do you think the government has prepared well enough for an Omicron outbreak? 44.5% said yes, 44.3% said no. Almost a dead heat.
It's illustrative of a government that actually talks big and but doesn't deliver. It's spin, no substance.
For the opposition, National and ACT, the preparation or lack of, is summed up by the government's approach to rapid antigen tests, otherwise known as RATs.
Look, it's just been a shambles right from the start.
The level of spin and cover-up from Ashley Bloomfield is breathtaking, even for him.
The latest development, a ministry backtrack. Last month, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield revealed the ministry had asked test suppliers to prioritise the government's orders over private businesses. At the time, the Director-General gave an assurance that would apply only to future orders, not tests already on shore.
We have discussed with our three main suppliers, which are Abbott, Roche and Siemens, that forward orders of tests that haven't yet arrived in the country, that those be consolidated into the government's stock.
But the Health Ministry has since confirmed some of the tests consolidated were already in the country, despite Dr. Bloomfield's commitment. The ministry still insists the tests were not requisitioned and says the government got its order in first and so was served first. It didn't cut the queue. It was already at the front.
We have not taken anyone else's orders.
There has not been a company disadvantaged.
None of the orders from the private sector providers have been redirected to fulfil the Ministry of Health's orders.
Regardless, the messaging is messy and explaining is losing. Ministers did not want to spend their first day back at Parliament having to clear up ministry misspeak.
I think the Ministry of Health statement probably could have been clearer, so I can understand why the conclusion was reached but the conclusion was incorrect.
These guys have got to work out exactly who's accountable here, and at the end of the day, the Prime Minister is elected, Chris Hipkins is elected, Dr. Aisha Verrill is elected, and they have to front up and be responsible for what's going on here.
One day into the political year, the tone is set. COVID-19 is not going anywhere, and neither is the pressure.
COVID modelling Aotearoa is standing by its latest projections of an Omicron outbreak leading to thousands of hospitalisations every day. That's despite the modelling being completed before the highly transmissible variant was discovered in the community in January. The modelling was released today with a scenario of up to 800 hospitalisations a day, even with 90% of people boosted. A worst-case scenario could see the hospitalisation rate jump to more than 3,000 cases a day. The modelling unit's hosted by Auckland University and funded by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Modeller Sean Hendy says the data is still relevant.
This is modelling that was used to help the government prepare for what was expected to be an Omicron outbreak. We didn't know how long we'd be able to hold it at the border, but there was certainly, most of us thought that eventually it was going to make it through the border. So this is modelling we supplied to the government. We always make a policy of putting out our reports that we've given to government so that people can see what decisions were being made on.
Was there any discussion about whether you should still do that, given it was prior to the outbreak and its relevance may be reduced by that?
Yeah, look, I think it still is quite relevant because certainly in terms of the scenarios we've looked at, we looked at an outbreak starting in 1 January, we looked at an outbreak starting 1 February. Those two scenarios do give us an indication of what we're looking at the moment. And so you can get a sense of what we might see from the scenarios in the paper that's been released today. We'll then update that, of course, as those case numbers come in and we get more of an idea what kind of trajectory we're on, we'll update that modelling. But I think people can still use this modelling to give us a bit of a sense for what might be coming over the coming weeks and months.
Why hasn't it been peer reviewed before release?
No, we do put it through an internal peer review program. On our reports, though, we say not formally peer reviewed, and that's to distinguish it from a journal article. We do eventually send our papers to journals, but they can take up to a year to appear after they've gone through the journal peer review and production process. So this has been through our internal peer review panel, which we always use to check our work and give us a sense of whether we're going in the right direction.
So you will be fully aware of the numbers that were released recently. They were pretty apocalyptic, right? 50,000 cases a day by Waitangi weekend. How accurate are the numbers you're putting out?
Look, there's a lot of uncertainty in modelling. It's very hard. We always put out a range of scenarios, and of course there are things that the public and the government can do to change those scenarios. So, we're trying to give the range of possibilities that could occur, and then people by their actions will determine what path we take. The modelling that came out a few weeks ago. It's a type of model that you can use to look globally, really, at different countries. It really doesn't look specifically at countries that might be on unusual trajectories, like New Zealand. We're one of the few countries that have been on this elimination path. We're still having control at our borders, and so those kind of details weren't taken into account in that modelling. I think the other thing is the language we use here is sometimes different. We're used to talking about cases. The cases that are reported on a daily basis, and some of the numbers that were reported were actually total infections. So also include the infections that we never learn about because people don't get a test. And the particular assumptions that the Americans made about that were that Kiwis weren't going to go get tested, and so we'd see this very large number of undetected cases out there, and they looked unreasonable to New Zealand eyes, given how good we are at going to get tests.
Do you have any concerns that the modelling will have the perverse effect of demotivating people? They won't get their boosters. They no longer believe what they're being told because they see all these numbers and they never eventuate.
Yeah, look, it is difficult. I mean, I think most people I talk to do understand that we're not trying to. I think Chris Hipkins compared us to a weather forecast. We're not actually trying to give a weather forecast. We're trying to give people an idea about the risks they face and how their individual decisions and the government's decisions might change those risks. So it's not like we're trying to tell you to whether to take your umbrella or not, and the fact that you take your umbrella actually changes the outcome, right? We've got a different challenge to weather forecasters. Most of the time, I think people do react well to these reports, and certainly just, for transparency's sake, if the government's using this work, I think the public does deserve to see it. Like I say, I think most people understand that the trajectory that we take really depends on the decisions we all make.
So your modelling looks at scenarios where on the low side you could have 200 to 800 hospitalisations daily, on the high side, more than 3,000. To be clear, in making those projections, do you take into account that we are under red restrictions and also the number of people who have been boosted, the mitigations?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons for doing the work was to try and look at the effect of current mitigations, the red traffic light setting, and the fact that we're rolling out this booster program. One thing I think that today's report won't quite capture is the recent shift to the 3-month interval between your second and third shot. That will actually certainly increase the number of people that are eligible. And, over the next few weeks, we should start to see numbers rise and people are being boosted. Actually, everybody on our team got boosted on Saturday because suddenly we were all eligible for our boosters. So we're in the new numbers now. That will have a big impact and will actually tend to push us towards some of our more optimistic scenarios.
And that is modeller Sean Hendy. What do you think about that? He aha o whakaaro. We would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Let us know your thoughts on the modelling, the numbers. Do you find them, demotivating, or do they actually get you moving to go and get your booster shot? And also on the rapid antigen test, what do you make of the he says, she says situation over whether they have been taken off businesses? Text us, Pātui Mai, 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 18 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere nei. Coming up, protesters peeved at the government's COVID mandates park up outside Parliament. The government's eyeing a shake-up of the ambulance sector as staffing and funding issues continue to plague St John. The charity runs the majority of New Zealand's ambulance service but has been struggling with response times amid massive demand for its services. That's left some whānau concerned their loved ones are at risk. Anei te kairi poata, Anita Blake Person.
The drive time between Auckland man Sam's home and the North Shore Hospital is about 7 minutes. But when his mother suffered a heart attack in early January, Sam wasn't able to get there himself. So he put in an urgent 111 call to St John for help.
My mother had pain in the sternum and it was radiating out across the chest. She felt very nauseous, she felt sick, she had pain radiating down her left arm and she was very pale.
St John says it categorised the patient as potentially life-threatening, but at the time it says it was facing high demand and its ambulances were all busy. Sam's mum was told to take an aspirin. He called again half an hour later at 10:30 p.m.
And then when I rang the second time, I was advised, look, it had been logged, terribly apologetic, excellent call staff. But the woman I got the second time, she said, well, your mother's case was logged as a priority one. She said, we're terribly sorry, Auckland has just been flooded with priority one calls.
An ambulance eventually showed up an hour after the first call was made.
Taking over an hour for the ambulance to arrive. We're not in the country, we're not on the outskirts of Auckland City. And that was really quite alarming.
Last month, St John confirmed they were investigating at least 19 incidents so far this year in which staff had been concerned that slow response times may have compromised patient safety. But Sam's mother's case isn't included in that 19.
I would be disturbed if they weren't investigating my mother's one, because I think if it's acceptable to take over an hour to attend a heart attack, I certainly don't think that's acceptable. In terms of whether it would have affected, I think it may well have affected in terms of what damage has been done.
In a statement, St John says it apologises for not meeting the caller's expectations and said it was experiencing extremely high demand for services across the country. Sam wants to stress the paramedics who helped his mother and the call centre staff he dealt with were all incredible and capable people. But he's worried they're working in a broken system, one that isn't coping now and may buckle entirely as Omicron cases rise. They're concerns Health Minister Andrew Little is aware of, with ambulance contracts currently being renegotiated.
We've topped up ambulance funding in the middle of the last agreement because we knew that they were struggling. They're providing double crewing in ambulances now, but some of those issues continue to be a concern. And the ministry continues to work with the ambulance providers to make sure they're getting on top of them.
Sam says the ordeal with his mother highlights issues with the way things are operating. He thinks the ambulance service should be run like a state-owned enterprise. Andrew Little says it's something that needs to be looked at.
That issue comes up from time to time, and as the proportion of the government funding of those services gets up, from 90% up towards the 100%, obviously the question arises, is this something that we should continue to contract out, or is this something that we should make part of the integral health services that we've got? I imagine that is a question we will have to address in the next 3 to 4 years.
But with vacancies across the country and COVID presenting increasing challenges, First Union Ambulance Coordinator Faye McCann says the time for a shake-up in the service is now, with St John's spending high on the list of many staff concerns.
There's been questions from staff for quite some time about how St John manages its funding and how they manage the service, and I think that the government certainly needs to be looking at this quite promptly.
A call to urgently boost our ambulance lifeline as it struggles with its own emergency.
It is 22 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some of you already getting in touch about the COVID modelling and the discussion we had with Sean Hendy. Jeff from Christchurch says, seriously, who can believe these modellers? They predicted 50,000 cases by last weekend. It just creates unnecessary panic from people and seriously damages businesses. Just to point out, today's modelling is from a different group of people than that Waitangi dated modelling. And Lorraine says, remarkable that we should be criticising because we haven't reached initial modelling numbers. It should be hallelujah. Do get in touch on the subject. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Parliament became a parking lot for hundreds of people's vehicles and COVID grievances today. An anti-government convoy arrived at the doors of Power with people from up and down the country voicing their opposition to COVID-related mandates. At least 1,000 people were there to tell the decision-makers their calls are breaching people's rights. Our reporter Kirsty Frame and cameraman Angus Drever have the story.
Wellington's CBD looked more like a campground today, with dozens of vans and motorhomes having travelled from both ends of the country to here, Parliament grounds. The group's drawn inspiration from a large protest in the Canadian city of Ottawa. There, a state of emergency was declared after a week of protests where trucks and tents have blocked roads over COVID border restrictions. While traffic wasn't largely disrupted on the main road into the capital, one commuter got a fright while driving north past the convoy this morning.
Just as we passed the off-ramp on the other side of the motorway, a cricket-sizable rock got thrown into my car window. I thought it was like a bullet at one stage because it was just so instant, the shattering. I'd driven by them. I mean, they were hooting and hollering, but they were doing that anyway.
An orchestra of horns was the clear sign the convoy was approaching Parliament, some from the ferry and some from the highway. Caravans, motorhomes, cars and motorbikes with flags and placards started rolling around the corner, and that's when they began parking up. Molesworth Street here has been at a standstill since about 11 a.m. this morning, acting as a car park for the protesters that are sitting at Parliament grounds. Further back, Lambton Quay has also been at a standstill right up the northern side, and the courtyard in front of Parliament steps is home to caravans. Almost 100 cars were parked up on the streets that wrap around the front of Parliament House. The protesters did set up a detour for those who got caught up in the convoy. These people told us why they made the trip.
We just don't agree with the mandates that are being put in place by government.
I know a 9-year-old boy, he doesn't want to go to school because the kids are bullying him because he's not vaccinated.
It's affected a lot of lives, it's affected my life, I've lost my job.
Personally, I think it's just over freedom for choice.
The protest was largely peaceful, with people setting up with camp chairs on Parliament grounds and food and drink being handed out. There was, however, barely a mask in sight. After a few hours, the speakers began addressing the crowd.
When we hear that, 90% of the country is all for this agenda, and it's only a handful of disobedient anti-vaxxers who are against it, well, I tell you what I've seen throughout the nation, that looks like a whole lot more than 10% of the nation.
The disruption today to Wellington was mostly isolated to the area around Parliament, with traffic congestion easing early afternoon. But at its peak, Wellington Free Ambulance warned it could experience delays if call-outs were nearby. Dozens of cars which were illegally parked on the road or footpaths weren't fined, and parking wardens kept clear from the area all day. Wellington City Council says it didn't want to put staff in harm's way, and police made no arrests.
It is 26 minutes past 5. If you're listening to that story on radio, you can check out the video online. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kiwis are being warned to prepare for pumped-up petrol prices, with rates likely to climb for some time yet. That's according to the Managing Director of low-cost operator Waitomo, who says international and local trends all point to more price hikes. It comes as prices for premium 95 and 98 have pushed beyond $3 a litre in some places. And party politics have turned petrol politics, with National leader Chris Luxon saying it's time to scrap regional levies like Auckland's fuel tax. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
Kiwis love to drive, especially here in Auckland, where premium petrol prices are now up around the $3 mark. The price of 91, that's what most of us put in our cars. Well, we've seen some prices today approaching $2.90. You could say petrol panic has started to arrive. A lot of people today have told us they're frankly worried about their wallets.
Absolutely terrible. I'm struggling. And it's going to cost me well over 100 just to get to Whitianga.
Right, I have been here for 3 years now. The price is going too much.
And don't hold your breath if you're hoping prices will plummet sometime soon.
The underlying reasons why it's where it's at, I can't see that changing quickly.
And while there is an element of crystal ball gazing, Waitomo Group Managing Director Jimmy Ormsby says all the trends suggest high prices aren't going anywhere.
So you've got the knock-on effect from the COVID economic shock. You've got interest rates increasing. You've got the actual supply issues with oil and investment to find more oil and to invest in processing, refining, all that.
So where has it all gone pear-shaped? The Prime Minister says high prices are simply down to the international environment.
We, of course, continue to monitor the market, do what we can domestically, where in fact it is domestic issues at play. But at the moment, very much we're in a global environment where petrol prices, crude prices are on the rise.
Then, right on cue, a press release from the Motor Trade Association, pointing out the biggest cost to motorists right now are taxes, 52%, made up of fuel excise duty, emissions trading scheme levies and GST. The Prime Minister, though, adamant there won't be any movement on excise duty.
Those are obviously legislated and set by regulation, so that's not something we've given consideration to.
But National Party leader Chris Luxon insists the Prime Minister and her cabinet could help push prices down.
Well, it's about controlling the things that they can control in order to make sure this cost of living crisis doesn't get worse. On the Auckland regional fuel tax, there's $500 and something million that's been collected. Less than half of it's actually been spent on the projects. The rest of it's just sitting in a bank account. And our view is that's something that they could do tomorrow. They could make that decision tomorrow and do something to control fuel prices there. The second bit is, while you can't control a lot of the global inputs to oil pricing, you can control government spending and things that are within their circle of influence.
But if Jimmy Ormsby's reaction is anything to go by, the fuel companies, including his low-cost Waitomo brand, aren't exactly banking on government relief.
The tax and levies, they're often not going to come back, are they? haven't seen taxes and levies on fuel drop anytime recently.
So what's his advice to the common motorist?
Keep your tank as full as you can. The underlying trend is for prices to be high and remain high, just from what I'm observing in the market.
But he appreciates that is a daily struggle for some, and you don't have to go far to find them.
Normally I'd just fill it up, but recently I've had to be, just choosing lower amounts because, it's pretty expensive.
We've got to be active as consumers and look for those deals if we want to drive prices down, I think.
It's really hard right now. Before, if I'm putting for $20, I could last a week. Right now, for $20, I can't last a day.
Another cost on Kiwis that shows no signs of slowing soon.
And you can check out that video from our two Nicks on our webpage. Kia ora e te iwi e Haere nei e Checkpoint, the trauma cleaning company forced to apologise after posting graphic death-related images on social media. The school kids who've only experienced class during COVID times and the remarkable tale of Winky the cat and the 9 lives he's lived in a decade. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Petrol prices, St John's, COVID modelling, anything on your mind. Don't forget you can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or our email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time for the headlines now. Ko Evie Anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says New Zealanders can influence how many people end up in hospital with Omicron by getting boosted. New modelling shows between about 800 and 4,000 people in hospital on any given day at the peak of the outbreak. Modeller Sean Hendy told Checkpoint the trajectory Omicron numbers take depends on the decisions we all make. He says modellers aren't trying to give a weather forecast, they're trying to give people an idea about the risk they face and how their decisions and the government's decisions change that risk. The government's giving $400,000 to rural support agencies to help farmers prepare for impacts of the COVID-19 Omicron variant. This includes scenarios such as planning for who will run a farm and who will look after livestock at short notice if farmers or their key workers are infected. Anti-mandate protesters are putting up tents on the grounds of Parliament. Most of the large crowd which gathered this morning have dispersed. However, a few hundred people are yet to leave. Under Parliament's rules, there are to be no structures or protesting on the grounds at night. ACT's leader, David Seymour, is accusing the Director-General of Health of hiding the truth about the government's procurement of rapid antigen tests. Last month, Ashley Bloomfield said the ministry had asked that all future orders be consolidated into the government's stock. The National Party says it's heard from numerous businesses who claim their orders were redirected. The Health Ministry says some of the tests which went to the government were already in the country, but insists they were unallocated. And a trauma cleaning business that's been posting graphic death-related images on social media has apologised. Crime scene cleaners co-owner Carl Loader has put out a statement after RNZ reported on the company's posts this morning. He says he sincerely apologises to anyone who has been offended. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nāianei, ko Nona Peltier, who is here to talk business. Let's start with Tiwai Point, the aluminium smelter, Nona. It could stay open beyond 2024. What do we know about this?
Yeah, so there was a statement out of the company that runs the smelter there, Rio Tinto. Their chief executive says that he sees a pathway for continued operation in the future, and he says that's part of the overall company plan to decarbonize. Apparently, the Tiwai plant is operating under about 85% renewable energy. And of course, as New Zealand marches on towards that 100% renewable energy goal, that of course has taken, I guess, a bit of pressure off the idea that they might close in 2024 as they had previously agreed to do. Now, it's by no means certain that that's going to happen. There's a lot more at stake than just what Rio Tinto wants. It has to do with what Contact Energy is able to negotiate, as well as Meridian, who has also a contract there to supply. And the Prime Minister, at the end of her press conference just about an hour or so ago, suggested that there was going to be a number of other issues before any sort of decision like that is made.
And one of the country's largest insurance groups, Suncorp, it's reported a sharp fall in its half-year profit. What's the reason for that?
It's really because of an increase in claims as well as lower investment returns, which a lot of our listeners will be familiar with as the markets have been in volatile conditions. So that's affected the income they get from their own investments, but also the number of claims. So the company's first half net profit, it dropped about $45 million to $84 million. And one of the things that was driving that up was an increase in the number of weather-related claims, up 41% to 72 million. And what the company is saying is that this is an issue that they're going to have to continually address over time. And they're looking to the New Zealand government and the people to somehow work out what we can do to mitigate some of those climate-related risks.
And Nona, should we take a jog around the market numbers?
Let's do that. I just wanted to pick up, though, on something we had earlier about fuel prices. Look, I just wanted to let you know that the price of oil, Brent crude oil, is $92.5 a barrel. That's up. Big price. And the New Zealand dollar ended up, the New Zealand top 50 index, it ended up 1/3%, a 40-point gain to 12,319, and that's on improving sentiment in global markets. The New Zealand dollar, 66.5 US cents, 93.5 Australian, and 49.1 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier with business news there. It's time to ditch the government's test mantra in favour of a more targeted message, according to the scientists processing those tests. Lab workers say they've been operating on the edge of their limits for nearly 2 years and simply won't manage the demand for PCR testing when the Omicron outbreak takes off, and there will need to be more widespread use of rapid antigen tests. Terry Taylor is the president of the New Zealand Institute of Medical Laboratory Science, and he joins me now. Kia ora, Terry.
Kia ora, Lisa.
When do you reckon rats need to be rolled out for more widespread public use?
Look, I think the evidence that we're seeing at the moment is when we probably get around that 1,000 cases per day in our labs, we're going to start to really need some assistance by that time. So clearly at the moment there's some work being done in the background, and it looks like there will be some rapid antigen tests starting to roll out in line with when that happens. But, I haven't got the crystal ball to tell us when that's going to happen, and listening to some of the modelers, it's got some scary scenarios coming up for us.
Yeah, I want to get to the modelling in a minute, but at what point do labs reach their capacity for PCR tests?
Okay, well, this has been clearly outlined in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So we think when we're around about that 50,000 mark, that will be really our limit with the way we are at the moment without having to break out and test everything individually, Lisa. So just to reassure people, we're going to try our best, but we can't keep that up for any period of time, and it will really start to affect other services that we provide.
Terry, to be blunt, do you think you're doing a lot of needless tests? Are you processing a lot of needless tests? People who have no symptoms, they're just the worried healthy.
I don't think so at the moment. We've seen a bit of a drop-off, to be honest, and we're doing around about that 20,000 at the moment. I think we're getting the group of people that we need to be getting, but the lessons from overseas are clearly that they were often in several situations testing a lot of the worried well, and they do clog things up for us. So the message does need to be stronger from our leaders that really we've got to save the testing for those that really need it.
Okay, so in respect of that, we have been told consistently test, test, test. What should the mantra be right now?
Okay, the mantra is quite clear. We're just going to have to take away from that type of approach and do more of what's known as a targeted diagnostic pathway. And it may not always involve COVID PCR-based testing that is currently being used at the moment. So it's just a change in emphasis. I mean, it will be hard for people to go down a different pathway, but as long as the messages are clearly spelled out to the public of New Zealand, we should be okay, and we might be able to just manage this and do what we're known here as stretching the rubber band so that we can just take the pressure off everything else for as long as possible.
What do lab workers, and you touched on modelling, what do the lab workers make of the case numbers and predictions in the modelling?
Oh, well, it looks to me a bit like crystal ball gazing in a way. I mean, it's not great for our staff on the ground when we constantly hear in the media the different modellers and their different scenarios, and I don't really think sometimes the reality of those that are actually going to be dealing on the front line with what they're saying are necessarily helping things at the moment. I think clearly we've had some good responses up till now with both the first variant and also with Delta. And I know this is a whole new kettle of fish, and we have been warning everyone about this. But look, just think about the wider implications of some of the things that are actually being said.
Is it stressing lab workers out?
Well, we're already stressed, Lisa, as you can probably gather. We've got a heck of a battle about to unleash on our workforce, and it's not going to be easy. So, we'll give it our best shot and we'll try our best, but I don't think it's helpful just to throw all these expectations on a workforce that's really already under stress.
Good to talk to you, Terry. Thanks for joining us. That's Terry Taylor, the President of the New Zealand Institute of Medical Laboratory Science. It is 20 to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pitipiti kōrero. After the news at 6, an apology from the company posting graphic death-related images online. Businesses have strongly rejected the government's assertion it didn't swipe their rapid antigen tests for their own stocks. The government spent most of last year with a ban on the importation of rats, but lifted that not long before Christmas. Businesses who got their orders in say they've been swallowed up by the government, something the Beehive categorically rejects. Businessman and boss of animation research, Sir Ian Taylor, joins me now. So, Ian, getting to the bottom of this is a tough one. What is your information on whether these rat tests have been co-opted by the government?
So, Lisa, I'm sitting here looking at 4 emails that have been shared with me directly from some of the major companies in New Zealand. They've shared them with me on the basis that I can't name who they are, but they are significant because they are afraid that currently, if they step up and counter the government's argument, they will be their staff will suffer as the government starts to allocate rapid antigen test that it should have been ordering a year ago. So I don't know how we've got to this position. I don't know how I end up as the spokesperson, but I'm happy to set up alongside the Prime Minister, Minister Hipkins. I am looking at emails that run counter to what both of them said today.
How so, Sir Ian? What do those emails say? And are they from companies or suppliers?
I have got emails from companies that are also showing responses from suppliers. But this is where this has come, and I saw it in the response to my leaving the meeting the other day. What seems to happen is they take something and they give it a little slight twist. So they're dancing on a pinhead with this, because they are right that they didn't physically go and take any orders that were in the country at the time. What they did was they took orders. So as an example, 3 of these emails show that they had placed their orders, they had prepaid for their orders, they got confirmation of their orders and confirmation of the delivery times, and a message from that they've included the actual message that told them that, sorry, they weren't coming anymore, they were going to the government, and they would go in a queue. So, yeah, I mean, in principle, the Prime Minister is right. They didn't go off and nick them out of the storehouse, but they actually took the orders and shifted these things. But I think,
So, Ian, just before we move on, because it's really important that we get this straight, because there's a lot of different narratives around this. So, from the trail of emails that you have in front of you, which are from companies and also suppliers, you are saying that these companies were due deliveries and that they had ordered, paid, were expecting to get them at a certain time. Then all of a sudden the supplier says, sorry, we are moving your product into the government's supply chain now.
Yep. So just to be clear, so I don't have, what I have is emails from businesses who are showing the progression of their orders and the fact that they were told that the orders were now being moved to the government. And I guess the question that we've really got to ask is, how do we ever get to a situation where businesses like these are afraid to just kind of correct the incorrect, to correct the statements, and all of them are saying they are not sure what's going to happen next with the government acquiring and taking precedence over everyone else. Their concern is they do not want to upset the government and put in jeopardy their chances of looking after their staff. And I just don't remember this being the country I grew up in. And what seems to happen is further divisiveness. These conversations shouldn't be fought out in public. The businesses have been really patient. They knew that the government had made a mistake not ordering rapid antigens. They knew that there needed to be a consolidation. But what they wanted to make sure is that it didn't affect their supplies, and there is a solution. You'll get another fancy shift of this, that private business can go out and do this anyway. No, they can't. The orders that are required now need to be very large. We just put in one for 1.5 million because we had to consolidate 23 companies. Now, those 23 companies all signed up within 12 hours because orders they thought they were getting, they weren't getting. So we've got 1.5 million coming from a supplier direct to these people to make sure that they can still look after their staff and, more importantly, use the rapid antigen tests in the way they want to use them, not the way prescribed by the government that says you can only use them with critical workers.
So, Ian, I have a statement in front of me from Roche, right, one of the suppliers of rapid antigen tests, and the statement is pretty categorical. It says that RAT kits have been and will continue to be supplied to all New Zealand customers, including the Ministry of Health, in the sequence that purchase orders were placed. It goes on to say, we would like to make it clear that no Roche rapid antigen test kits were requisitioned by the government. No supplies destined for private customers were or will be diverted to fulfil government orders. So they are pretty straight up and down about the fact that they have not passed on any orders that were destined to companies to the government. Yeah. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, and, that's fair enough. This is what we mean about the transparency. So it's taken a while for Roche to come out with this. I'm looking at here something where somebody, and I'm not, there's Roche, there's others as well, but I'm looking at something where, you have to ask yourself, why would somebody have said, look, we've just found out this, and the guy just gave me a yell and said, look, your orders are going to have to shift, they're going to the Ministry of Health. And all of this, actually, what we really need to do is step back from this and realise why we are in this position. We are in it because for 2 years, the government banned rapid antigen tests. They are only here because businesses actually forced them to do that. And then when the government finally did it, what they've realised is they did it so late that they're now in a position where the government is actually deciding which businesses are critical, which are essential, and nobody wants to come up against them because that decision of whether they're essential or critical is going to impact their workers. And we're already seeing how shambolic that is. So, I'm just saying, I'm just a messenger. I've seen this stuff, and I cannot understand how we got to a position where at this really serious time, the government made a mistake in being late ordering rapid antigen tests, and that is non-debatable.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Really appreciate your time. That is Sir Ian Taylor there on the rapid antigen tests, and the government has said that there will be an announcement later in the week about which businesses are deemed critical in the criteria. While plenty of us have had interruptions to our lives because of COVID, spare a thought for the littlies who started school in 2020. Now into year 3, they're yet to have a full year of school in the classroom. But with the start of the new school year, their teachers and parents have their fingers crossed. It's third time lucky. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to meet the class of 2020.
It's just a few days into Term 1 at Jean Batten Primary. After an unconventional last 2 years, these Year 3s London and Haja are thrilled to be reunited again.
It was pretty exciting. Yeah. And I was talking everything about her at home.
Yeah, and I was thinking about her in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are really good friends. It was hard being apart.
Yeah.
And working at home wasn't much fun either.
I asked my mom if I can come to school every single day.
It's kind of boring at home, so I like it at school because you also get break time and you also do schoolwork.
There's been plenty of break time for these children, break from the classroom that is, living with the disruption of COVID since first walking through the gates. Yet to experience a full year on the school grounds. Coming back this year was like their first day all over again.
I nearly cried to my mum because I didn't want to change classes.
Others, like Beatrice, weren't too phased.
I feel happy.
Nervous?
No.
Ronuv can't believe it's been 2 years since his first day.
I feel kind of nervous because it's been I don't know how much days. I felt like I was still a year 1 or 2.
He says it was pretty hard doing his schoolwork at home.
I felt lazy by doing it at home.
Is that hard to focus?
Yeah.
Why was that?
Because it's a lot of things you can do at home.
But now they're back in the classroom at last.
You're all standing up. Get your lunch and sit at your desk.
Here in room 14, Liana Satera is in charge of year 3 and 4. She says while they've got some catching up to do, parents have done their best.
What we're doing now is closing the gaps pretty much to try and get them where they need to be by the end of the year. But I must say though that what the parents were doing last year in lockdown has helped quite a bit in terms of they're not as behind as I thought that they might have been.
She says the kids have embraced the new routine of school, eager to learn again. Time back in the classroom won't be taken for granted again.
The teachers are ready. We're here. We've done the preparation. We're just ready to just get back into it and get these kids learning and socialising and being part of a routine again.
As a mother herself, she sympathises with parents who've worn many hats over the last 2 years.
The reality of being home, a teacher plus a mum, has been quite a big task, but we get through it.
Teacher aide at Jean Batten, Aisha Smalley, is in a similar situation. Her son Kaysen started school just a few months before the first lockdown. She counts herself lucky. Learning was easier at home for her than for other parents. But it was still hard for her little boy.
He didn't really have much time as a year two, so coming back to school this year he was very nervous. I remember hopping out of the car, he was telling me, "Mum, my legs are shaking and I don't know why."
They're both hoping the school gates stay open this time, all year.
He's really looking forward to this year and he is hoping that we don't have any more lockdowns.
Just over a third of the way through primary school, with a third attempt at a full year on school grounds.
And we'll put that video up on our webpage. It is 7 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He kōrero ngā hau tēnei. This next one's an interesting one. 10 years after he disappeared without a trace, a beloved pet is set to be reunited with his owners. Winky, a one-eyed but very sociable moggy, wandered off in 2012 from his family's apartment in Auckland's Viaduct. And his owner, Karen Robson, who has since relocated to Christchurch, feared that was it. She'd never see Winky again. That was until one day last week when she was taking a cat nap and her daughter answered a very unexpected phone call.
They had tried to call me, and of course my phone was on silent, so they ended up contacting my partner who was at work, and he was just as a second contact, but he had actually never known Winky, and so he ended up calling my daughter and said, "Oh, is your mum there?" And she was like, "No," and he told her, and so my daughter came running into me and she was bawling her eyes out and she was like, "Wake up, wake up," and I couldn't make out anything she was saying. All I could catch was something about a cat alive, and because, you know, when you're foggy and you're still waking up, and I just had to sit up and I was like, calm down, calm down. She calmed down and she just said, "Oh my gosh, Winky's alive." I was just like, What? And I checked my phone and I saw that the SPCA had called, so I quickly called them back and they just said, "Did you used to own a cat with one eye?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "He's just been brought in this afternoon to us." I was like, I can't believe it. I said, "He went missing 10 years ago."
It is absolutely incredible. So where did Winky turn up?
He turned up in Mount Roskill, and we were living in an apartment in the Viaduct at the time, and it had like a communal courtyard, you know, that all the apartments shared. And so he used to go in the garden there a lot, but he did occasionally just wander out onto the street in the Viaduct because he's quite a sociable little cat. But he never wandered too far. And then it was a Saturday night he went missing back in early March 2012. And, he just never came back. And, you know, we put out signs and everything and no one ever saw him. And we wondered if because it was I think it was America's Cup was on or something at that time from memory. So it was really busy in the Viaduct around that time. And because he was so sociable, we just wondered whether, he went up to people and because he had one eye and looked a bit funny, maybe some drunk people, you know, thought, "Oh, look at this cat and, you know, let's do something with him or something." And we thought maybe he was thrown in the water, or I liked to think that he actually hopped on a yacht and sailed to Fiji and was just enjoying life in the island somewhere. But, so we just never knew what happened, and I just thought, maybe he drowned or something in the harbour.
Well, this is a much better ending, Karen, to what you imagined. Was he microchipped?
Yes, he was. So that's the bizarre thing. So what the SPCA told me is that someone in Mount Roskill has actually been feeding him for the past 10 years, but they just thought he was a stray, and he would just occasionally come to their house, and they would just feed him, and he would leave again. And so, I guess because there was one eye, and I guess he looked a bit skinny and everything, they didn't think much of it. But then it was Friday last week. Apparently some strangers saw a dog attacking him, and so they quickly intervened and managed to save him, and it was them that took him to the SPCA, and that's when he finally got scanned for the chip.
What kind of condition is Winky in at the moment?
He's in a stable condition. They said he's really happy and alert and very smoochy, and that he's eating and drinking and toileting okay. But they don't know whether it's from the dog attack or whether over the years he's grown an abdominal hernia, and so that he needs surgery for that. If he doesn't get the operation, he eventually won't survive. So it really is, he needs that. But he's also got a stage 4 heart murmur, which is apparently a bit risky for their surgery, but they reckon he should be okay. He just needs it. So, I'm desperately trying to sort out now how we can. Because we've moved to Christchurch now. So the latest update, which I just found out a couple of hours ago, is that we can't actually bring him to Christchurch because he's not fit for any sort of travel.
So Karen, you haven't actually been reunited yet after all of this time and this fantastic news. You're still separated.
Oh, I know. I'm so desperate to see him. And of course it happened right at the beginning of long weekend, and SPCA are closed over long weekend, and they don't allow visitors because of COVID. So it's been a nightmare, really, as we're so desperate to see him. But now we've just found out that we can't actually bring him home in the near future because he's too unwell. So now I'm frantically trying to find someone that can look after him until he's better so we can be reunited.
So Winky needs your help. If you're in Auckland and can foster Winky until he is well enough to fly, you can text us on 2101 or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz and we can put you in touch with Karen, who desperately wants him back. She just needs a foster for a short time until he's well enough to travel. Do get in touch. Again, text 2101 or tweet us at checkpoint.rnz.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton, tēnei. A leading COVID-19 modeller is standing by its latest projections that an Omicron outbreak could see thousands of hospitalisations daily. The worst case scenario by the University of Auckland hosted unit, COVID-19 Modelling Aotearoa, is more than 3,000 a day. On the lower end, it's up to 80. However, the modelling was completed before the highly transmissible variant was found in the community. Modeller Sean Hendy, who's part of the group, told Checkpoint the data is still relevant.
As those case numbers come in and we get more of an idea what kind of trajectory we're on, we'll update that modelling. But I think people can still use this modelling to give us a bit of a sense for what might be coming over the coming weeks and months.
Sean Hendy says the data was used by the government in preparation for an Omicron outbreak. Laboratory workers warn they won't manage the demand for PCR testing when Omicron takes off. They say they've been operating on the edge of their limits for nearly 2 years and are calling for a change from widespread testing to a more targeted approach. The president of the Institute of Medical Laboratory Science, Terry Taylor, told Checkpoint processing 50,000 tests per day is the limit. He says once that's reached, there'll need to be a shift to rapid antigen tests with PCR tests only for those who really need them. He says the varied predictions from modellers aren't helpful for lab workers who are already under stress. Today is the start of a nationwide booster drive with an extra 1 million New Zealanders being urged to get their third shot. People who are now eligible for their booster will be sent a reminder via text or email. The Prime Minister says New Zealand won't be able to stamp out the Omicron variant as it essentially did with Delta. Jacinda Ardern says 2 weeks into the outbreak, case numbers are lower than expected, but that's not to say they won't increase. She says the best thing people can do to prepare for the surge in cases is to get their booster dose.
Today is the start of the Big Boost week with pop-up vaccination clinics and extended hours across the country. Northland has more than 40 clinics up and running and a new iwi provider. Hawke's Bay has extra weekend booster clinics. Auckland Metro has more than 350 sites open, including a new one at the Cloud, with 4 major drive-thrus. And South Island DHBs have also extended hours with a drive-thru in Dunedin.
202 new community COVID-19 infections were reported today. An extra 250,000 free flu shots are being funded this winter, taking the number to 2 million. Seasonal flu cases are expected to spike soon as border restrictions begin to relax. The Prime Minister says vaccinating more people for the flu will save lives and preserve capacity in the country's hospitals.
For most people, if they experience the flu, that is something that they can manage at home in themselves. But for vulnerable, immunocompromised individuals, the seasonal flu can be dangerous and it can put significant pressure on our health system.
The flu vaccine can be safely administered at the same time as the COVID vaccine, whether that be a booster shot or a paediatric vaccine. The government's ring-fenced $400,000 to help farmers and growers prepare for the Omicron outbreak. The money will go to rural support trusts already working to ensure primary producers have contingency plans to keep operations running. The funding has also been allocated to supporting growers and farmers' mental health, as well as COVID-19 contingency plans. A convoy of all types of motor vehicles parked outside Parliament today after travelling from all corners of the country. At least 1,000 protesters were there and almost 100 vehicles blocked streets next to Parliament and parked on footpaths. They believe the government's COVID rules, like vaccine mandates, breach their rights. The crowds remained largely peaceful and after a few hours, speakers began addressing the crowd.
When we hear that 90% of the country is all for this agenda and it's only a handful of disobedient anti-vaxxers who are against it, well, I tell you what I've seen throughout the nation, that looks like a whole lot more than 10% of the nation.
Despite the dozens of vehicles parked illegally, Wellington City Council didn't want to put parking wardens in harm's way by sending them in. And Te Pāti Māori has launched a petition calling for constitutional change, including removing the British royal family as head of state. It also calls for a constitution centred on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which would include a Māori parliament and returning land to iwi and hapu. Co-leader Rawiri Waititi says the Crown has failed in its duty of care and the country is ready to relieve them of that duty. The petition is based on a mana motuhake policy blueprint the party released last year. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Damien Fenton looks at Ukrainian wars of independence. Turns out it's been trying to break free for over a century. The BBC meets the sisters who can taste words. It's another form of synesthesia, which turns out affects more than just sound and colour. And Carl Mullen on the stoush between Spotify and some big-name musicians. He's been wondering about the little folk. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods and a few showers. For the remainder of the North Island, scattered rain for most today, but only partly cloudy from Manawatu to Wellington. For tomorrow, areas of cloud and isolated showers, some heavy and maybe thundery about the central North Island. Looking to the south for Marlborough and Nelson, mostly fine today, apart from drizzle patches in Marlborough, clearing this afternoon. Rain at times tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine at first today, but a few spots of rain later. Rain tomorrow with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. For Canterbury, mainly fine today, but cloud increasing tonight. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon. For Otago and Southland, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with drizzle about eastern Otago and occasional rain elsewhere from the afternoon. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, fine spells and a chance of a shower. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A trauma cleaning business that has been posting graphic death-related images on social media has been forced to apologise. It comes after an RNZ story revealed crime scene cleaners has been posting photos of call-outs to suspected suicides, sudden deaths and assaults since April 2020. The company's clients include the Ports of Auckland, Kiwi Rail, the Ministry of Justice, Auckland and Christchurch City Council. There are now calls for the police to investigate, and one law professor believes charges should be laid. And just a warning, Sam Ollie's story contains references to suicide, sudden death, assault and graphic details about human remains.
Crime Scene Cleaners co-owner Carl Loader put out a statement to media late this afternoon after RNZ exposed the company's posts this morning. He says he sincerely apologises to anyone who has been offended. Loader says he thought that sharing images of the work would raise awareness of important social issues. In one photo posted on Crime Scene Cleaners' Facebook and Instagram in 2020, a smiling staff member held out a piece of human bone to the camera after being called out to clean a train that had hit and killed the person. RNZ also counted photos linked to more than a dozen deaths, suspected and attempted suicides and assaults. Carl Loader says he should have kept a closer eye on the content. The Instagram and Facebook pages have been taken down and the company is reviewing its future on social media. But University of Auckland law professor Mark Hennigan is alarmed the posts have been going out for nearly 2 years.
There clearly are offences under the Coroner's Act and under the Crimes Act, particularly by holding up the human remains and making, I'm glad I found this, and then saying these little beasts with the maggots eating human remains. That's just unbelievable. That's a clear breach of Section 150. It's an indignity.
In his opinion, police need to investigate the cleaning company's posts immediately.
Facebook doesn't care about the law in New Zealand. You can't rely on Facebook to pull things down that seem inappropriate. You really need the authorities, which is really the police in this particular case, should be laying charges.
In a statement to RNZ, a Meta spokesperson said Facebook allows graphic content with some limitations to help people raise awareness about those issues. But New Zealand's chief censor David Shanks isn't satisfied by Facebook's screening of Crime Scene Cleaners' page.
As far back as 2019, Facebook announced that they would be taking a stricter approach to suicide and self-harm content. And I would have hoped that this sort of material would have been identified and detected.
Today, he has been talking to other digital safety organisations and regulators about directly contacting the business.
Engaging with this company, learning from what's happened here, perhaps educating and helping them.
Victims advocate Ruth Money saw some of the posts before Facebook and Instagram pages were deactivated today.
It is absolutely disgusting. People's tapu and mana should be upheld and respected, and there really just are no words for this behaviour, let alone it being so consistent over a number of years.
She also believes the posts have breached clients' privacy and gone against sections of the Crimes Act and Coroner's Act, and the business should be investigated criminally.
And if there is a jury member or a witness that sees that, all of a sudden you are risking upholding the criminal procedure. I just have no words for what these cowboys have done.
The Chief Coroner is assessing whether posts breached non-publication orders. Otago University computer science professor Ali Knott says Crime Scene Cleaners' posts highlight why, in his view, Facebook needs to be more transparent about its content monitoring algorithms and if they're working.
They're cutting edge and the state-of-the-art AI algorithms. We don't know the details. But more importantly, I think, we don't know how the algorithms perform.
Ali Knott says Facebook uses human moderators to review content that has been reported alongside the algorithms. The New Zealand Police would not comment today when asked whether the business's social media use was being investigated. Auckland Council says it hasn't technically ruled out using the business again, nor has the Christchurch City Council, which says the cleaning company was paid through the Mayor's Welfare Fund, and the council would seek police advice if it had a similar application again. Kiwi Rail also hasn't ruled out using the company, saying it never gave permission for the photos to be posted online, and it will monitor whether the company complies in future. Ports of Auckland says it was shocked by RNZ's story, but the future of its contracts with the company will depend on whether Crime Scene Cleaners changes its ways.
And the Acting Privacy Commissioner Liz McPherson says she is looking into the issue as a potential privacy breach. It is 12 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. While New Zealand tourism operators are months away from welcoming international foot traffic, Australia's flinging the doors open. All fully vaccinated visitors will be allowed in from the 21st of February, while it's a chance to reinvigorate a sector that's had two of the toughest years on record. Some businesses will face a mighty challenge to scale up their operations to meet demand. The ABC's Nick Grimm has the details.
For Great Barrier Reef ecotourism operator Steve Edmondson, news that overseas tourists can finally return to these shores fills him with outright glee.
Woo, that was so good to hear. Yeah, welcome relief, and something we've been preparing for, but we can't, press the green button until we heard that. So absolutely delighted.
His Port Douglas-based business Sailaway has faced rough conditions as a result of the pandemic. Now he's looking forward to calmer seas ahead.
Yeah, we're really pleased that is the next step towards trying to rebuild what is 50% of our market, and a very important recipe for employment and regional employment and distribution to Australia. So good news.
Steve Edmondson, when I first spoke to you almost 2 years ago now, almost to the day at the outset of the pandemic, you were looking at a very bleak prospect ahead of you. You've managed to get through to hopefully what might be the other end?
Yeah, we think so. I've passed. The first year was very, very stressful. The second year was hopeful but patchy. The lesson for COVID really is taking nothing for granted. So to be out, fresh air, with friends, family, space, in the ocean, on the reef, snorkeling with turtles, as I say, and coral. This is wow, how good does it feel to do this again?
Oh, look, it's a complete relief, Nick. I mean, it's been a long time coming, certainly for our team, which has spent a lot of time in lockdown. We're thrilled to hear this announcement.
That's Keith Saunders, Managing Director of Melbourne-based Global Ballooning.
So, I mean, it's kind of a new world. We're just going to have to kind of rediscover and, our networks and get back to work, yeah.
And is that going to present some challenges?
Look, I mean, there's been tremendous challenges during this period that we've had to go through. It'll just be another one of those things. Certainly from us, it's quite a daunting task to just kind of connect with the international kind of agents and, because many people most people in that field have lost their jobs overseas. So, it's kind of like starting from the beginning again.
And tourism businesses like his are hoping the first plane loads of international visitors will not only bring those ready to spend money, but also the sort of travellers who, before the pandemic, provided much of their workforce. The Board of Airline Representatives of Australia is the industry body representing the carriers responsible for 90% of all international passenger flights to and from this country. Executive Director Barry Abrams says airlines need consistent COVID rules across Australia's states and territories.
So we would expect a reasonably gradual uptake of international tourism into Australia. So I think the main first thing that airlines will be looking for is the detail and clarity of the arrangements. Many airlines have already penciled in some improvements or increases in capacity into Australia, noting that the way the virus has been circulating both in Australia and overseas, that has been a definite dampener on consumer confidence and demand just at the moment. So I know that's a bit of a long way of saying that some of this will still be a bit of a wait and see for airlines to see how the market and the demand progresses over the next few weeks and months.
The Black Caps have called in some new and old faces for the remainder of their fractured home summer. The reinforcements have been summoned as Captain Kane Williamson remains on the sidelines with a frustrating elbow injury. Leonard Powell reports.
Black Caps captain Kane Williamson won't be risked for New Zealand's upcoming test series against South Africa. Coach Gary Stead says Williamson's ongoing elbow injury could be re-aggravated if he comes back into the side too soon. Williamson hasn't played for the Black Caps since the tour of India in late November. Stead says leaving Williamson out of his 15-man squad for the South Africa series was the right call for the team.
He's bitterly disappointed about it. He loves playing for New Zealand. He hates missing test matches in particular. But for us, it just was the wisest call, I guess, to make.
Bowler Trent Boult will also miss the first test against South Africa starting next Thursday as he awaits the birth of his third child. The absence of Williamson and Boult, alongside the recent retirement of Ross Taylor, has brought a mixture of newcomers and returnees to the squad. Central District's pace bowler Blair Tickner and Canterbury wicketkeeper Cam Fletcher have been called into the test squad for the first time after impressing in recent seasons at Plunket Shield level. Fletcher says he is rapt to reach this point in his career.
It's a pretty amazing feeling. I guess been playing cricket for a long time, and it's something you kind of always hope that would happen one day. Standing here now, it's pretty special.
All-rounder Colin de Grandhomme returns following a foot injury, while Otago captain Hamish Rutherford makes a surprise return to the national setup. The 32-year-old opener played the last of his 16 test matches 7 years ago and will provide both experience and batting cover to the squad. This will be the first time a New Zealand test side has not featured either Kane Williamson or Ross Taylor since January 2008. The team that day featured Cumming, Bell, Fulton, Fleming, Sinclair, Oram, McCullum, Vittori, Mills, O'Brien and Martin. Stead is impressed with the strength of the squad he has named and says the depth on display has not always been the case in New Zealand.
We're in a pretty, I think, unique position at the moment of having some real depth and strength, and it's exciting when you lose, I guess, a Taylor, a Williamson, a Boult out of the team, that you can still put a squad on the park that looks really, really competitive, and I'm not sure we've always been in that position in the past.
Tom Latham will again captain the side in Williamson's absence. Meanwhile, the White Ferns kick off their series against India tomorrow with a lone 2020 match, followed by 5 one-day internationals. All matches will be played in Queenstown as the squad builds towards hosting the Women's ICC Cricket World Cup at the start of next month.
A lot of you getting in touch about the price of petrol. This person from Wellington says, it's all very well to talk about the fuel tax in Auckland. However, those of us in Wellington who don't have the 10 cent a litre fuel tax are still paying a similar price to what's being suggested that Auckland's paying. Parts of Wellington paying $2.97 or $2.99 for 91 petrol. Another listener, Mark's got in touch to say, our personal vehicles are bigger than ever. Speak for yourself. I drive a galloping jelly bean. If Kiwis are worried about fuel prices, they could always drive something smaller and more efficient instead. And on a similar note, the moaners should be grateful they're not paying the full cost of their emissions yet. Cheers, says Mark. And another person says, unleaded 91 fuel is currently Aussie 170 per litre across most of Australia, which works out at New Zealand $1.83. Why are we paying $2.60 a litre? Additional taxes are the answer, says Martin. Thanks for getting in touch. The government says New Zealand won't be able to stamp out the Omicron outbreak as it announces it's the start of the big boost week and promises special support for the rural sector. Thousands of people protesting vaccine mandates gathered outside Parliament today as it resumed for the year. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the week ahead is the big boost week. 51% of the eligible population have now had a booster shot, and Ms Ardern says those who haven't yet are about to get a tap on the shoulder.
And from today, the extra 1 million people who can get their booster now will receive a text or email alert.
The government has also ring-fenced nearly $500,000 to better resource rural support trusts to back farmers during the Omicron outbreak.
$400,000 will be allocated to rural support agencies such as the Rural Support Trust and those supporting Māori agribusiness to help farmers prepare for the time ahead with COVID, such as getting together a plan for who will help to run the farm or look after livestock at short notice, and to be on hand to support them through COVID if someone should contract the virus.
In addition to boosters, the government says it will fund an extra 250,000 more free flu vaccines for this year's winter campaign, bringing the number of people covered for a free flu jab this year to 2 million. The step up to red light restrictions saw supermarkets once again do big business on what we used to do our business. But it's got some urging shoppers to think more green when they hit the shops. Here's Kim Moody.
The Prime Minister had barely said the words red light setting before the second nature panic shopping to stockpile for when nature calls kicked in.
Don't go overboard. You don't need a trolley of toilet paper because it just puts pressure on our supply chain and means that others will go without.
That's Countdown's Kitty Hannafin, urging New Zealanders to keep their urge to splurge on loo roll in check. Associate Professor at the University of Auckland's School of Psychology, Nikki Hare, says it's a natural response to an unknown threat.
Everybody suddenly is aware that they're in a situation that's unpredictable. And one of the things you can do is make sure that you've got enough to look after yourself. And the obvious thing is to have supplies. It's really a response to unpredictability and the desire to try and have a little bit of control or be prepared for whatever might happen next.
She says each set of restrictions gives us the opportunity to rethink how we want to live and shop.
For a lot of people, making do has become something that we're reintegrating into our lives, which was, of course, the lives of our grandmothers. You know, they just put up with a pot that had a broken lid forever. Now we might think, oh, I need a new pot because that's broken.
In Australia, panicked shoppers switched to wet wipes when the Omicron outbreak saw nary a toilet paper roll left on the shelves. But senior lecturer at AUT's School of Future Environments, Dr. Jeff Seedon, says they're not flush-friendly.
Wet wipes are the worst thing that you can use. However, if you're desperate, you don't have any toilet paper, you're looking at the leaves outside and they're not to slash, then people use desperate measures for that. But the thing about wet wipes is that they don't break down.
A flushed wet wipe is destined to end up in a wastewater treatment plant, where staff have to individually pluck them out. If the sewer stars align and the wet wipes find coagulated fat they can cling to, it can form the stuff of nightmares. 2 years ago, Gisborne council workers waged a 7-hour war with a 15-metre-long fatberg blocking one of the city's main sewer pipes, deploying brute force via picks, shovels and horses to break it apart. But a future without flushed wet wipes could be on the horizon. Billy Joe Hoheparopiha's company, B-Day, sells bathroom-based innovations, like a foam wash to add to toilet paper to use for a final wipe. She says it's a more sustainable option for people who need or want to feel cleaner after going to the toilet.
I had a girl earlier on and she was 15 and she's basically going to be living in a diaper for the rest of her life. They can't help her in terms of what her bowel's doing. So, you know, she was using hundreds, thousands of wet wipes a year and flushing them down the toilet, and now she uses B-Day.
Jeff Seedon says if you're trying to pick the most sustainable toilet paper, keep it natural.
It tends to be unbleached, it doesn't have a nice perfume attached to it, and it hasn't got printing on it. So each one of those adds to the amount of materials that you've got to put in, and therefore adds to the environmental impact. So, you know, plain and as brown as possible is probably the most sustainable type of toilet paper you can use.
And stick to only buying as much as you need.
Fatberg chat, great pre-dinner conversation. The koala could be inching closer to extinction, according to conservationists. Research by the Australian Conservation Foundation has found that their habitats have been severely affected by government-approved land clearing projects. The ABC's Catherine Gregory reports.
It was just under a fortnight ago that Prime Minister Scott Morrison cuddled up to a koala as he announced a $50 million federal government investment into improving the species' protection and recovery. But conservationists fear it's not enough.
Look, we welcome the $50 million that this federal government has put towards koalas, but it's a drop in the ocean.
Freya Cole is from the Australian Conservation Foundation.
Eucalyptus seeds or eucalyptus seedlings planted tomorrow are not going to help the koalas across New South Wales, the ACT and Queensland that are at grave risk right now.
The group has released research today which it says shows how koala habitats are being destroyed.
This federal government has approved commercial projects that has led to land clearing to the tune of 25,000 hectares that belongs to koala habitat. The amount of koala habitat approved for clearing has increased every year since 2012. Now, that's ironic because the koala species was listed as vulnerable 10 years ago and land clearing has only increased.
The research found that over 60% of the koala habitat approved for clearing by the federal government was for projects like mining, land transport and residential housing.
One of the biggest culprits is commercial scale agriculture. There's often a blind eye turned to commercial level agriculture, and native forest logging is exempt from the EPBC Act. So what we really need at this stage, if we really want to help koalas, are stronger national environment laws.
That's the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Freya Cole says her organisation's research involved investigating all the projects approved under the Act to assess the damage from the land clearing projects. The foundation is calling on the federal government to stop approving those projects.
So we've been told that the scientific committee that deals with the conservation listing of species has indeed put some advice to Minister Susan Lee on the koala. We're calling on Ms Lee to do two things: act upon the science, and if scientists are telling her that the koala needs to be uplisted from vulnerable to endangered, then that is what she should do. And secondly, she needs to release that information to the public.
And if koalas are listed as endangered, what does that mean?
It changes the way our country operates. So many people love and adore the koala. So many people travel across the world to Australia to see the koala. So if this government wants to get real about protecting koala, it's not about offsetting and it's not about restoration. That's only a small part of it. What this government needs to do is stop approving projects that are known to destroy koala habitat, and they need to do better on climate.
A spokesman for the Federal Minister for Environment, Susan Lee, says she's reviewing the advice from the Threatened Species Scientific Committee. And he adds that projects approved under the EPBC Act that have a significant impact on the koala also need to be offset by strategies that enhance their habitats. Some of those restoration projects include pest and weed control, revegetation, fire planning and improving land management practices.
Before we head off, your thoughts on St John and restructuring how it's funded. Francis says, why in heaven's name is the ambulance service not totally funded by the government? Include the firefighting service as the full government funded essential services. This from another listener: both ambulance and palliative care needs to be funded by the government, not reliant on the goodwill of donations. And Mike's got in touch to say, don't know when Winky will be up to travelling, but I'm driving Auckland to Dunedin in a couple of weeks and would be happy to give him a lift to Christchurch. Ka pai, Mike. If you have missed anything on the show, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. Tomorrow on First Up from 5 a.m. Are you feeling the heat? Man, I am. Frizzy here, while First Up looks at why Auckland's giving Fiji a run for its money as humidity reaches sticky and miserable levels. Tell me about it. Ka te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau, pō Mārio. We will catch you tomorrow, same time, same place.
RNZ News headlines. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. A leading COVID-19 modeller is standing by its latest projections that an Omicron outbreak could see thousands of hospitalisations daily. Laboratory workers warn they won't manage the demand for PCR testing when Omicron takes off. They say they've been operating on the edge of their limits for nearly 2 years and are calling for a change from widespread testing to a more targeted approach. And today is the start of a nationwide